you so very much for being here, those of you in the room and those of you on Zoom. We're delighted to have you here for the second Adventures in Living this summer. I would like to say just a word that we're always looking for people who would like to be an adventurer in living. And actually, as I look out in the audience right now, I see quite a number of people who have been adventurers. Would those of you in the room who have adventured with us, please just raise your hands. Wow, that's quite a few. Well, the rest of you need to step up and let me know that you would like to be an adventurer. So if you would like to, just let me know. I'm Diane Haynes, without my regular name tag, which I forgot, and marketing gave me one. And if you know of somebody who you think would be really good, let me know that too. I always say, though, volunteer for yourself. I've been volunteered too many times to know that it's good to volunteer yourself. Okay, today we have a very special presentation. We have Roger Curtis here, and Dick Martin, oh, he's right behind me, will be introducing Roger. Dick has played a large part in our Adventures in Living program over the years. He's our go-to man for all the filming and getting everybody shaped up to be an adventurer. So right now I would like to introduce Dick.
Thank you. This is the second session for our Adventures in Living, and it's just going to be dynamite. Roger is wise, as we know, and he was afraid that the applause might not be great enough, so he brought his own cheering section this morning. So I'm happy to introduce Roger's daughter, Lee, and granddaughter, Megan. Would you give them a wonderful Ocammer welcome? On this video, you will hear Lee's voice, but she is not on camera. She is just gently leading Roger through this wonderful journey. And I'm so grateful for that. And we're so happy to have you here today, along with Megan as well. There are also probably some family members who are Zooming with us today. And if you're out there, I hope you'll stay with us until the question and answer time, and then come up on the net and let us know you're there, because I know Roger would love to hear from you. So, in this film, Roger will cover 390 years of family history in less than an hour. Now, if that sounds impossible, just sit back, watch, listen, and enjoy.
Well, it's about time. I hear I'm almost 98 years old. And it's time to spill the beans. Tell the story of Roger's life and history. And to share that with my family and my Ocamic family. It all started in 1635. The ship James left England in 1635. Aboard were 100 people. The ship arrived in Boston Harbor
In August.
in August after a terrible storm, a hurricane actually, that blew the ship right into New Hampshire. Well, lost were all the anchors, all the ropes, all the sheets, everything, but not a loss in life. And thanks to a very competent captain. My forebear, Zacchaeus Curtis, with his bride, Mary Pennington Curtis, arrived in the New World after spending a little time in Boston, and then they proceeded north to Salem, a distance of 20 miles away from Boston, where they spent some time. And then there's a spell of time where I don't know anything about the history of the Curtises. So about 200 years later, Charles W. Curtis comes on the scene and was the patriarch of the Curtis family. He was an industrious man, knew how to build shoes, knew how to build a lot of things, including apples. Whereupon, that new era of agriculture, apples became part of the Curtis clan, as well as shoes, because my grandfather was a shoemaker too. So we have a shoemaker and we have an apple grower. The apples grew into a very substantial orchard. Some 40 to 60,000 bushel a year were produced in that orchard. Macintosh, early Macs, and the Gravesteins. And it was a wonderful sighting.
How many children did your grandfather and Cora Bell have?
Well, 4 that I know of. The last one was my dad. He was the youngest of 4.
So there was a growing up in the Curtis shoe business. You want to talk about the mecca of the shoe industry?
Well, at that time, Brockton was a pretty big shoe maker, Brockton, Massachusetts. But Marlboro came on the scene because of my grandfather, Charles W., which he's normally referred to. And he was an industrious person. And he decided, along with other dignitaries in Marlboro industry, to industrialize Marlboro so as to bring public transportation to the little town of Marlboro, make it more substantial. But made it possible so that the families coming from Europe and elsewhere could get to their place of employment, to get work. And so they decided that what a nice place to build a factory. And a very substantial factory it was, 4 stories high. And they, together with the Rices and the Howes, were the big shoemakers, and there were some 10 factories building shoes in Marlboro. But what I remember is walking through that factory as a kid with my grandfather and having him address everyone he could know there. He would address by the name and an anecdote. Hi, how's Joyce? How is so-and-so doing in school? Boom, boom, boom. He knew all the history. And there was a lot of people in that factory. And it was a wonderful, wonderful time that we spent together exploring the Curtis Shoe Factory. And
They made shoes for the Navy.
they built more than 1 million shoes for the Navy. So they were a pretty big shoe operation. Well, that's a story about grandfather's generosity, because he developed this spread of beautiful lands called Lake Farm. And the Lake Farm overlooked this lake about a half a mile away. And it was probably 6 or 7 bedrooms, sleeping porch, just lovely. But the story I want to tell you about his generosity was that there was this black man that was shared, that he was given permission to share in his garden, and he had a little plot for Jimmy's garden. And then Jimmy didn't live too far into the woods, but somewhere there he lived. Well, this one evening, my sister and I, we were then ages probably 9 and 13. We're having dinner with grandfather and grandmother at Lake Farm, and it was an awful thunderstorm and lightning. But we decided we would walk home to the camp, some mile away through the woods, which we did. But out of nowhere prompts this black man saying, "It's Jimmy, it's just Jimmy the tramp." And with that we then knew, because we knew Jimmy the tramp. And he guided us back to the cottage. And it was so nice to, because he had his own little garden in grandfather's garden called Jimmy's garden, and grandfather could share. He knew the spirit of sharing. Thanksgiving dinners were very big in our family. The Wayside Inn was a gem of a building that my uncle bought, and it was called the House Tavern. And it was just a lovely situation in Sudbury, Massachusetts, with a grist mill. It's just a beautiful sighting of sheep roaming along the ways. So as you'd approach this lovely cabin, you would see a grist mill turning, and you'd see the sheep moving. And the crowd of people that were invited numbered 50 or 60 people, all Curtises, being invited to a Thanksgiving dinner. The dinner was held in the main part of the building, which was very substantial. To picture 4 uncles carving turkey, obviously at the apex of the H for Harvard. And while they did that, all of us kids were invited to go out and play football or frisbee or one thing or another in the pastures. And it was a lovely time that I remember fondly. That particular place was subsequently bought by Henry Ford, because he had a penchant for Yankee architecture, I guess. And it was just wonderful. But we would take ownership of that for Thanksgiving Day.
Want to talk about your dad?
Well, my father went to Harvard from Andover, Exeter. He enlisted after his second year at Harvard in the American Expeditionary Force. France was not doing well. This was World War I. And France was not doing well against the Germans. And these young whippersnappers from Harvard and Yale and Dartmouth and wanted to take charge of this situation and help out. Most of them wanted to go fly these French planes or biplanes, but those that were less fortunate got to drive ambulances. These were Model T Ford ambulances that were used, and he wound up being an ambulance driver. He wrote home, and I can remember on the newspaper, Roger Curtis writes from the front. And it was a story once a month would appear in the paper. He was like the America's newsman for World War I. And it was really well written.
Your father was awarded a special commendation.
A Croix de Guerre by the French government. He wound up saving 3 French soldiers, and he never mentioned it to me at all. I only learned about these things later in in his letters or his commendations. And I think we have a slide of his quarter year, maybe to show you. Yeah, there it is. So I'm proud of him in many ways, but we didn't have the kind of father-son relationship. I didn't know he was on the Harvard tennis team. And here we had a tennis court at grandfather's Lake Farm, beautiful court. And we never played on it together. So it was a strange kind of father-son relationship. Esther, it was my mom's name.
Esther Hitchings.
Esther Hitchings. And she was a lovely, lovely person with beautiful wavy brown hair and a nice personality. She was quite unlike my dad. She had the personality my father had the discipline. I remember the discipline part of my father when I was 5 or 6 years old and my sister was 9. Climbing up, we used to love to climb the willow tree in Marlboro where we were living, and we would climb up as high as we could and then let the branches and gravity take its toll, so it return us to earth. Well, my father thought this was a pretty dumb idea and wanted to discourage us. And he said, if I catch you on that tree again, I'm going to take this branch and whip the leaves off it and make sure your back sees it. Well, my sister was really a devil. She was a rascal. My father no sooner left the premises than off she would say, okay, let's go. And up we'd go up to the tree, and he caught us up there, way up there, and we got the worst of it. And we learned our lesson.
We could go on now and talk a little bit about the 4th of July event. Grandfather Curtis, C.W. Curtis.
Yes, C.W. had the same birthday as the 4th of July. And so it was decided by his sons this one particular day when I was probably like 12-ish, 13, that he would invite the entire town for his birthday party. And they went on a Macy's Day kind of celebration. Well, in those days it was not exactly like it was at Macy's, but it was a substantial operation. It was such that the whole town of Marlboro turned out, fire trucks, ambulances, police, and scaffolding was erected around the lake, and I was given the opportunity to light some of the fireworks. It was a big deal, and it was mostly because he wanted to make sure that the town knew where those apples really did come from, and they can't just walk over grandfather's land and pick apples. I'll give you apples.
You know, you spoke earlier about working on the farm, boating to the farmhouse for the apple picking, but there was another part of that story where he would employ the German POWs. Do you want to talk
yes.
about that, Dan?
This is early in the war, World War II. And of course, apples required to be picked. Well, who's going to pick them? There was no one there to pick them. And there was a mess of apples to be picked. So Camp Devens, which was an army camp not too far from Marlboro, was decided that we'd get the Germans to help us as a peace, for money. And I found out that these Germans were the smartest, best, what a specimen of man they were.
So it was 1944 and the draft was breathing down your neck. What did you decide to do?
Yeah, well, all of a sudden, my father, who had been a prep school guy from Andover, Exeter, and knowing that the draft was breathing down his son's neck, and he managed to talk Aunt India Howe, my aunt, into some money, I think. I think that's how it happened. so I could go to a private school, a new low-paying private school called Belmont Hill. And that was an epic in itself in my life. I was there for an accelerated senior year, and it was tough. The transition from secondary public school to private school was rather challenging. The average class size was 7 in a class. And as typical of those days, the Headmaster Hamilton would say, okay, you have some choices. Harvard A for English, Harvard B for English, or just ordinary secondary English. Well, what do you guys want? Well, all these young whippersnappers say, well, of course, Harvard A, not knowing what the heck we were asking for. And we found out, and it was tough. The headmaster was the head of English department for Harvard, and he was a very expert teacher, but tough. So that was an epic I had to learn. So here I am. It's time to graduate. He said, well, Roger, where do you want to go to school? I said, respectfully, Mr. Hamilton, with the marks I've gotten here at Belmont Hill, my chances are very limited. Well, he said, didn't your father go to Harvard? Well, he did. Well, would you like to go to Harvard? I said, sure, but I can't afford Harvard. He said, well, you're in if you want to go. Because in those days, the headmasters of the schools and the, I guess, dean of the English department were granted 1 or 2 slots that they could provide on their own. He says, well, you're in. I said, well, that's terrific, but I can't afford it, but I thank you for that. And I let it go, and from that point on, I volunteered to go to the Army Air Force. I saw this film on flying jets, and it fascinated me. And flying a jet airplane. It was called the P-80 Shooting Star, and it was gorgeous. And I wanted it like big time. So I signed up for it. Into the Army Air Force. That's, in those days, it was the Army Air Force. And so I got admitted into the program, and from Fort Devens went down to Wichita Falls, Texas, and started my basic training. And
you had to take a test, right?
And so they did a thorough testing job to see how these guys, we was 2,000 or 3,000 of us there, having signed up, and so they wanted to test us how we would fly, how would we do in the program. And so it came time for the results of the test to be known, and who was in, who was out. I think it was 2,000 or 3,000 of us in this big hangar, young, eager cadets, all wanting to fly. Went through all the A's, all the B's, all the C's. Nothing. Sheet metal worker, this and that. Well, none of us wanted to do sheet metal working. That's not what we signed up for. Well, to make long story short, around came CU, and it was me, and they said, cadet. Well, the place went in an uproar, and I got tossed up in the air and kicked around like a ragamuffin. But I was a hero for a day. And so there was some 20-odd guys that made the cadets. And then they decided to put another group of 20 seasoned veterans with us from the 8th Air Force in England, fighter pilots. And they were just wonderful. They had stories like, oh, you wouldn't believe. Well, along comes the program, and there was no program. It wasn't ready. And so what does the Army Air Force do? Say, well, back to basic. And so the seniors who are now with us said, back to basic, you gotta be kidding. And so they just refused to sign on to the program, and they went AWOL. Well, they tossed us the fine art of going AWOL, those guys did, because there was nothing to do other than to go back to basic. And so we learned a lot from those guys. Not all of it was beneficial, but it was...
Did you get into trouble for going AWOL?
No trouble at all. The Army finally turned the cheek and just said, no, yeah, you guys are right. We got nothing for you.
You enlisted in 1944, right, Dad?
Yes.
Okay.
In late 44. I was in the service for only about 7 months before I was offered a opportunity to go to West Point and Amherst and then West Point. But the proviso was I had to sign up for 7 years. Well, I had become acquainted with this master sergeant from the hometown in Arlington, Mass. And he said, Roger, you're no Army guy. You know, this isn't your life, and you'd have to sign up for 7 or 8 years. Do you understand? And I said, thinking about it, that doesn't sound right to me. So we decided I would not sign up for West Point, and so I said, no, thank you. So instead, I was discharged honorably, and I wanted to fly. I wanted to go home with wearing wings, you know, because that's what the whole program was. Don't worry about it. We'll buy you the damn wings. And so I went home with wings, unearned.
What was his advice to you, though, to protect you?
Oh, as a master sergeant, he just said, it's important now to realize that the Army is not what you think it is. They'll do with you what they're bloody well pleased to do with you, and you're not your own soldier. And so, when you take a step off this base, make sure you're in the reserve, sign up in the reserves, and then you get married as soon as possible. You have as many kids as possible, and that'll prevent you from going and flying those B-29s that I was destined to do up in Korea.
So let's go back, because we need to talk about 1943 when you met a really great gal.
Yes, this was in Belmont Hill, and I was asked if I'd like to go on a blind date to this big dance that they had at the school. And so her name was Patricia Ann McDermott. And it was a blind date, but I had a picture of Pat, and she looked good to me, and we hit it off really good. Plus the fact that she was a terrific dancer, and she liked music. All right, what's there not to like? And so that went very well. And then, of course, I was at Belmont Hill. You had to play football, and I was on the football team. I was first team right end, and we were going big gangbusters. But I got kicked in the mouth by the pulling tackle, and I had this big swollen lip. So the second date was a movie date. I went to see Laura in Boston. The movie Laura, with a smiling face. Well, that went also very well. And I then realized this gal is really something. And I said to myself, gosh, I'd sure love to kiss that gal, but my lips really do hurt. So I decided the best way is just to say it. Honey, I really do. Well, she said, that's okay. There's another time. And there was another time.
But what did you have to do when you were starting to discuss marriage?
What I did was I was invited to go to her aunt's house.
Her grandma?
Yeah, in Belmont. And the family had all gathered around to see this event, to meet the new kid in town. And grandmother was upstairs, and grandmother Kate, her name was, and she was an Irish lady, not doing well health-wise, in bed, but they wanted me to talk with her because the decision was really up to Kate, whether it's yes or no, whether there was blue smoke or no smoke come out that chimney.
So this is Mom's grandmother.
Pat's grandmother,
Yeah.
Kate. And so I was invited to go upstairs and have a little chat with Kate. And she was quite a gal. We talked for almost an hour. We came down, everyone's waiting. And it's like a big hooray goes up because they said, it's a go. Kate says, he is a good guy, he's a good lad, even if he is a Protestant. And so that did that.
So you were married in 1946
Yes.
at a Catholic church, and then you had your reception.
Yes.
Where?
A reception at the Copley Plaza Hotel, which I think broke Kate's back. It's a very, I don't know if you're familiar with Copley Plaza, it was a pretty fancy place.
Let's go back to as you were getting out of Army Air Force cadet.
Yes.
Applied or accepted into the Northeastern Co-op economics major for 5 years. You want to talk about that, Dad?
Yeah, it was a good takeout position because Belmont Hill was a good prep school, and so my grades were good enough for Northeastern. They just weren't good enough for Harvard and Yale and Dartmouth. So I was accepted finally at Northeastern, and that meant you would go to school for 25 weeks and you'd work for 25 weeks. Well, that suited the family situation just perfectly. And I would work at various places. I got the assignment along with another person at Northeastern whose name was, of all people, the governor's daughter, Emily Saltonstall. And she had German too. And so we both were able to get this nice job at MIT Radiation Lab where the Germans were lived. And we would help them draw up their rocket instruments, and they would record, all the vagrancies of rocket flight. Well, that was really very exciting stuff, but it also paid well. So again, I lucked out.
So kind of at the same time, you then ended up working in the bank transit program with the co-op.
Yes. And that was still when I was at Northeastern Co-op, and before the MIT experience. I was working at this bank, and it was a big bank in Boston area. I was making $32 a week as part of that Northeastern program because that was their deal. What happened was a mistake happened. You see, I was married, and all of a sudden I come home one day and Pat says, we're having a baby. I said, Pat, we can't have a baby. I was on, this is not in the cards. Well, we're having a baby. Wow. Well, I put my thinking cap on and said, what am I going to do about this? How much money more will I make? And I came to the number, instead of 30, I was $34 a week. I had to make 60 in order to just survive. And so I went and I knocked on the door and said, Mr. Erickson, this is blah, 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 blah. And come in, Roger. How are you? You've been doing a wonderful job at the bank. I wonder, and he was very happy with me until he heard what my mission was. I said, well, I'm here for some bad news. And I told him I wanted a raise. And he was practically flabbergasted that I should have the nerve to ask for a raise. And I told him why. And finally he said, well, he didn't know how much I was making. So he asked, how much are you making a week? I said, $32 a week. And you're asking for how much? $60? It doesn't work that way, Roger. And so he said, well, I tell you what, after much talk, he says, if you promise never to say a word to anyone, I'll offer offer you $50 a week. I said, that's good, but that's not good enough. I mean, the numbers are pretty dire here. And so I said, well, thank you so much, and you've been very polite, and that's a really decent offer and all, but I just need more money than that. And he said, well, you'll never do better than that offer, Roger. That's it. And so what happened, I went to Northeastern Cooperative Work Department and sat down at one of their in their office at lunchtime, and the phone rang. And I pick up the phone and say, Cooperative Work Department. And there's this chap on the phone. He's the president of a small company, some 60, 70 people in Littleton, Massachusetts, called McElroy Manufacturing. And he was Ted McElroy. And Ted McElroy was the world's champion telegraphist. And so he was wanting to know if we had at Northeastern any talent in drafting and so forth. He needed mechanical and electrical drafting. And I said, well, I think there may be a chance that we have somebody here, referring to me but not saying me. And that was a little bit sneaky, wasn't it, Dick? That's what I did. And I said, well, I tell you what, let me see if he is available, and maybe we can arrange to have him come out and see you. He said, that'd be fine. I'll be here in the afternoon. And I said, well, fine. I called back and told him that we had such a guy here, and what his name was, and whom to expect and when. And we had a wonderful meeting in Littleton, Massachusetts. It went very well, and he said, well, Roger, now how much money do you really want for this job? And I said, $60. He said, they told me this would be in the low 30s. I said, not for this job, Mr. McGoey. This is a much more highly paid job. This is drafting. And he said, I can't do that. So he said, well, I've already turned down $50 once this week, once today. So I can't do this again. And I got to thinking as he was talking, maybe I liked him, I liked the job, I liked the environment. Maybe I'll say yes on the proviso that he'll interview me personally within a month following my acceptance, which he did. He said, okay, that's a deal. If you're good enough, I'll offer it to you. And after about 3 weeks on the job, he comes over to my place of business at the company. He says, you got your $60, Roger. You're worth it. I've seen your work product. And so that was that.
Through McElroy, the story goes on where you were selling new systems of rigging telephones.
Yes, new telephone systems.
Yeah, and you were working hand in hand with General Telephone.
General Telephone was our main main customer. Mm-hmm. And we would sell power equipment to them. And part of the program was to sell, these were independent telephone companies.
You were going to Camp David?
Camp David. Camp David we had sold the system to Camp David. And it was Monday morning, and I was due to arrive to consummate the arrangement with Camp David. And I wrestled with this.
What was bothering you?
Well, the fact that these systems were very susceptible to lightning strike, and they were crapping out like crazy. And so I decided that we could not accept. The order. And then I had to go and tell the people there in Pennsylvania that not now. Until we get this squared away, we cannot accept the order. And the phone rings just as I'm talking, which is another story of my life. It's the luck of it is just incredible. And this chap who was one of the senior marketing people at General Telephone said, Roger, is this true what he's told you? That you have told him all about your troubles? I said, that is true. Well, he said, Roger, you just made yourself a big-time relationship with me and with General Telephone. You're going to get a lot of business. And I did, and we did, and the problem was solved, and things went on very well.
I love how you talk about how it taught you the lesson of integrity.
It did. Integrity.
Dad, last time we were talking, you said along the way you've worked with people who have really made a difference in this world.
That's exactly.
Do you want to
right.
start with McElroy?
Yeah, why not? First McElroy, Ted McElroy, who was a jolly telegraphist, a wonderful sense of humor, a good Irish soul. And from there, I'm thinking of another chap who bought out McElroy. His name was Warren Donhofer, and he transformed the company from telegraphy to a very sophisticated communication system.
So, after Mr. Donhofer passed away, you felt like you needed a new situation and went on to work at Raytheon. Talk about that, Dad.
Yes, why Raytheon? Because I always worked with a small company, McElroy, and then Donhofer's the Warren Company. And I wondered what it would be like to try to succeed in a larger company like Raytheon. And I knew Raytheon. They were an arch competitor of ours. Well, why not? So I took on a job with Raytheon. And that was a heartbreaking situation after working with Warren and working with Ted McElroy, because they didn't have anyone like those two to counsel with or to work with. And so I was left adrift a bit.
From Raytheon, that led you to work with some of the Raytheon associates and begin your company, Product Planning Associates. And
they were located in Westport, Connecticut, and in Wellesley, Massachusetts, the site of two of the founders of the company. And it was very successful. And my first big endeavor was in Long Island with a company called Potter Instrument Company, and they made printers and other fancy new devices in that computer age. And the president of the company needed counsel on which way to go.
And you also had another company called the Photo Circuits that you worked with.
Exactly. Also in Long Island. Photo Circuits was the world's largest maker of printed circuits. They made practically all of the printed circuits for automobiles, amongst other things. And so that was exciting for a while. I worked with them for more than 5 or 6 years as their principal in-house consultant. You know, I was the consultant that came and stayed.
You worked with a company called Thoron, which eventually became Syntex. Is that through Product Planning and Associates?
It was not quite that way. It was with a company called Syntex, and through Syntex, I was asked by the president of that company, who happened to be the manufacturer, the designer of the birth control pill. And that fellow, his name was Cal Gerasi. Cal Gerasi is widely recognized as being the inventor of the birth control pill. But he needed to broaden the base of his company, primarily financially, because it was poorly financed for the work he was attempting to do. And he was interested in insect control as well as human control of bugs and insects of all kinds. And he wanted me to go out and find a company that would augment his other activities, principally with money, because he was running out of money.
He needed a cash cow.
And he needed a cash cow.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was lucky enough to find him a cash cow to buy. Unfortunately, the cash cow had a problem, and the problem was that the company's product line had a flaw in that it was all designed around a shell product called Vapona. And Vapona turned out to be a very serious nerve agent, and it was killing small haired animals.
So this was for the flea collar,
And this is where the flea collar came in. The company that we found was in Dallas, Texas, called Theron Manufacturing. Two brothers had found this company, and it was all built around insect control from shell, which was very noxious. It was close to a nerve agent. And we didn't know fully the dimension of that when we bought the company, but we found out fast, and that's where I had to do some ingenious thinking. How am I going to change this around? And fortunately, I had the good luck of reading about Xerox, the Xerox story, and how they changed their name from Haloid to Xerox. And what happened, technology all changed. Well, I said, if they can do it, I guess I can do it. I guess we can do it. And so I was sitting on this plane going down to Dallas, Texas, where the principal plant was and where I was now working. I had been made president of the company, and a group of guys were challenged to come up with a product that has already been through FDA approval here in the United States, and would be available for us to take as a worldwide license. That product was Bayer, like acid Bayer aspirin. They found that company rather quickly, and they found the product. The product was just delightful in that it had what they call a fine release curve in PVC, polyvinyl chloride, which we get a worldwide rights to make for small animals. So we took that product over. We transformed it completely. The product line was changed. The name was changed, and off we went. We were getting on in no time, getting on the marketplace with a product that was called the Pet Product of the Year, in very short order, like 5 months.
Let me just get this straight, Dan.
Sure.
The way I heard you is the company Theron had flea collars. They were in conjunction with a division of Shell Oil Company, but they had a toxic chemical, Vapona. And you needed to, your bright idea was to, let's clean this up. And you found a different product through Bayer in Germany. And you were able to do a rebrand and relaunch of the flea collars.
Exactly so.
And all of this under the company umbrella of Syntex.
That's right.
Where Mr. Gerasi also developed his birth control pills. So there are a couple divisions under
That's right.
Syntex. Then let's talk about one last professional involvement, and that was you had a role with EG&G.
This is a company that was formed by 3 engineers from MIT who were very much involved in the nuclear program of the United States. They were known for making the detonators for these bombs, which are very difficult to do safely. And they had come up with a solution. Well, I was not involved in that at all.
Your job was to sell one of their divisions, am I right?
Exactly.
You had made a comment to me that you had a reputation as, was it the Wish Boy? If they
Yes.
wanted something done, they called upon Roger.
Yeah, that's true. I had phenomenal luck in buying and selling companies. They weren't large; they were small, and it was a wonderful time of my life.
Talking about family life, there were outings and adventures. I'm just going to list a few and you can elaborate.
Okay.
North Shore,
Oh yeah,
Cape Cod,
lovely, lovely spots in Massachusetts, and it turned us all into beach people and swimmers. And it was fun going to those lovely beaches and showing our kids how to swim.
picnics and dipping our
picnics.
sandwiches
Oh,
into
yeah,
sand.
nice times.
We loved skiing. Went
We were a skiing family for sure. Being close to Vermont, it was an easy ride up on the weekends to go up to Vermont, to Stratton Mountain as our principal destination. And all of the kids would pile in. Hopefully they'd remember all their equipment. What a lot of fun that was. Big roaring fires, good times, good tales.
Well, it was like 2012, and you
12.
came for a tour here. Do you want to
Yes.
talk about that day?
Yeah, it was a beautiful tour arranged by Lee. And we were overwhelmed, really. I guess that's the only word I can say with the difference between Oak Hammock and the facilities for CCRCs that we were looking at in Connecticut and New York. And the Connecticut and New York people were so expensive, and they didn't have enough warmth and a feeling of belonging. They didn't make you feel you belonged. But here they did. We were welcomed by everybody here. And so it became very clear that this is a good place to live. And then to see all the facilities and all the programs that were available to us, it was just magnificent. Now, here's a post-thought after going through these reflections that I'd like to leave behind to the Curtis family and to others. How wonderful it is to experience this life with joy and looking on the good side of life, not just the bad side of life. And there's so much to be learned from it all. I'm so grateful for the encouragement of other people and how they inspire you. And it's so nice to be here in a positive environment, to let people know that it's worthwhile. And I am grateful for the many Oak Hammock people that have made this possible for me. Oh, continue to smile and to exude joy, because there's a lot to life, and it's amazing how much there is at the closer to the ending chapters than there is just to the beginning.
Thank you so much. And Roger, thank you. Now, comments, questions, memories from the audience? I think we're speechless. I know I am. Oh, okay, John Axe.
Roger, you once told me about going to Lowry Field in Denver when you were training as a trying to become a pilot. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Remind me.
Actually, it wasn't so much, John, the training as a pilot. I was there to become uh, a assistant, this and that, in the Air Force. This was a dwell in the life of Roger's military service.
Thank you, Roger. Anyone else? Okay, Lee would like to know. This is Roger's daughter, Lee.
Yes,
And she
I
would like to say a few words.
thank you. We just wanted to say on behalf of my dad and my daughter Megan, we want to say, and the whole family, we wanted to thank Dick, because without Dick's patience, we did this through 3 separate filmings, because we just needed that kind of time, and Dick was there for us and allowed us to take up that much time out of his life to make this happen. And what a special gift he has in putting it all together and, allowing us this. And we're just so grateful to Dick for this. Is there anything you want to add, Daddy?
Dad is very grateful for this family and for you, Lee, and for all the people that contributed to this. Well, there were many. But Steve, my son, who's not been mentioned, is helpful, and Raina, who's not here, my other daughter. And it was just so great to have this contribution from these people to make it all happen.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for coming. Dick?
Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week. We're having Down Memory Lane with Wilt Wagner, and I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you.